Welcome to Completing the Puzzle with Jason DeFranco. I'm your host, Matt Doolittle, and I am here, of course, with Mr. Jason DeFranco. How are you?
I'm great. How about you?
Fantastic.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We do this on Monday. We post it on Tuesday. As you can see, we're still evolving our studio, still putting everything together. A big thing that we've started is a series of podcasts. Now, it's not just like a one-off. It's nothing like that. It's a series. So the last time we did the initiative, getting up, actually doing it, and now it's the plan to win, correct?
That's it.
And so when you lay out the plan to win, you have to have an end game in mind and everything. But where do you start?
Well, you've decided to get up and do something, so what are you doing? And why are you doing it? And how are you going to be sure you succeed?
So you say that, but how do you know you're going to succeed? Like when you're laying out that roadmap and
you plan that you're going to succeed.
Yeah, but we've talked about it. You had this amazing business plan that you put together before you and Chad launched Team Solutions Dental.
Right.
How did that come about? How did you put that together?
Thinking. Lots and lots of thinking. Lots of reflection. I started with one of those templates. When you want to make a business plan, go look for business plans that have already been made. Learn from them. So I started with that. And then I just asked myself about 1,000 questions about what is it we're doing? Why are we doing it? How's it going to work? I tried to imagine the end. Begin with the end in mind is one of those famous sayings. And that's what I tried to do. I said, what does this look like? And I picked a number. I picked 3 years from now. I said, what do I want to build over the next 3 years that will be meaningful, that will be exciting, that will be worth doing for 3 years? And said, okay, well, I've got a pretty good idea. How big, how large in terms of people as well as finances, as far as space goes. And then I said, well, how do you get from A to B? I mean, it's like when you leave your house going somewhere, you leave your house, you have a destination in mind. I'm going to the supermarket. I'm going to a concert. I'm going wherever I'm going. You don't just pull out of your driveway and pick a direction. You figure out where you're trying to get to, and then you look at the map or you look at GPS and you say, oh, this is the way to get from here to there. But when you're doing planning like that, a lot of it you're kind of making up. There aren't clear road signs. There aren't specific streets you have to travel down. There's just kind of this general gap between where you are and where you want to be. And you got to figure out all the pieces that are going to go into that.
What were the key elements in that business plan? What were the things that because we've talked about it, and you've told me that you showed it to your mentors and people in the business,
Yep.
and they were astounded.
Yeah.
What were the things in it that you were like, oh, that's awesome, or that they pointed out, or that they gave a check mark to?
Well, you got to understand a business plan in the first place. Business plans are made for one of two reasons. They're made for strategy, or they're made for funding. If they're made for funding, you're justifying your plan, your existence, to someone to get them to give you money. If you're doing it for strategy, you're mapping out your method, how you're going to get from point A to point B. And many business plans are for both. I wrote it as if it was for both, which means there's common ingredients of all business plans. There's an executive summary and business description and market analysis and things like that. In our case, the executive summary was, the name, the mission, vision, and values, the products we were going to offer, and then the description was where were we going to operate, what was going to be our service radius, things like that. But where it got interesting was the market analysis, where I had to take a serious, no BS look at our market and our competitors and say, is there a reason for us to exist in this market? Is there a large enough gap here? Is there some unfulfilled need that justifies building a whole company around it? And that's where it got fun.
And what was your reason?
We can do it better.
Well, I mean, you've talked about, you worked at places where they didn't have all their stuff together, and that was the reason you got quote unquote fired, and you guys took off on your own. But I mean, the reason was we can do it better. How did you know you could do it better, and how did you do it better?
Because in most industries that are matured, that have been around for a while, the main competitors become stagnant. It's very, very common. Just about any industry you can find it, where sometimes it's only in certain marketplaces, sometimes it's widespread, where the same competitors have been, boxing against each other for 20 years, and they've gotten used to each other. It's almost not, they're not even boxing anymore. It's more like they're dancing. They're not competitive. They just, they stay on their side of the room, and the other one stays on their side of the room, and they do their dance. And I looked at that, and in this marketplace, it was rampant. The labs were complacent. They were underserving their customers. They were taking too long with things. They were failing on their promises left and right. And I said, this is crazy. If you just came in and did a good job, you'd be better than the competition. And if you were better than the competition, word gets out.
And it comes down to just doing the job, just
Yeah.
getting it together, putting it out there. Putting out this roadmap. Things happen. The world happens.
Oh, yeah.
Look at what's happening right now in the world.
Yep.
The big C word that's out there, COVID. How do you adapt to those changes based on when you're looking at your first 3 years? Everything's going great. Your second 3 years, everything's going great, and then COVID. Like something like that happens, or a change in the market.
Okay, yeah, but you just lied. First 3 years weren't great. Second 3 years weren't great. There were periods that were great. Overall, it was great. All kinds of crap happened. Things went wrong all the time.
And you had goals set for those first 3 years. So when you
Specific goals.
specific goals, and what were those?
We had financial goals. We had structural goals. Financial was obviously the big driver. We wanted to be $3 million in 3 years, which everybody told us was impossible. And I said, well, it's not that it's that hard. We have to be $1 million after our first year and 2 after our second. If we can do it once, all we got to do is repeat it 2 more times. And they said, first of all, you're not going to get to $1 million in a year in this industry. I said, okay. And they were right. It took us 9.5 months. But the reality was we didn't just have that number. We had that number. We had all the positions we'd have to fill to do the work to hit that number. We had a number of how many new customers we would have to drive in and keep happy to have that amount of work. We had numbers of positions. We had structural things. At this point, we're going to need a supervisor for these 7 people. At that point, we're going to need another one for those 5 people. And we had it all mapped out, position by position. I had an organizational chart built for a $3 million lab with a bunch of blanks. Here's me. And it was funny. At one point, I kind of filled in every spot where, at the beginning, you're wearing lots of hats.
Mm-hmm.
So we had something like 30 spots on the board, and 18 of them were me, and 12 of them were Chad. And it was like, oh, wait. And then we've got 3 people doing work. Cool.
And then you got to figure out where everybody else is going to go.
Right.
So you set your 3-year marker, and then you hit it, and then what do you do from there in terms of?
You close the business.
Well, yeah, you get their pink slip and send them on their way. But it's setting up where what are your next set of goals? Like, how do you get to that point and then keep building on those?
That's one of those principles we've talked about before, that sometimes you don't know what your next goal is because you're working on the current one. But as soon as you get done with the current one, it's obvious what the next step is. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you have to be looking way ahead. Sometimes you have to say, okay, this year I'm going to do this, and as long as I can do that, then this is my plan for 5 years later. In our case, we had the 3 years mapped out very, very literally. I mean, down to the person. We knew exactly how many vehicles we were going to buy and how many pieces of equipment we were going to buy, all the way down mapped out. When we got to the 3, there was a lot more uncertainty because things were changing the industry. Different things were going on with competitors. New products were coming out. So we didn't feel like we could have as rigid a plan going forward. But we said, $3 million in 3 years worked. Let's try 5 and 5. Let's just stick with that kind of a metric for now. And what would it take to do that based upon what we see shifting? But the thing is, it's always shifting. You cannot have a plan and expect it to work. The plan won't work. The plan will get you in the right direction. And then things are going to come up that don't fit your plan. And you have to adapt to them. You have to go in with the intent that this plan is a guide. It's not a fixed blueprint that must be adhered to. This is a guide to get me from here to there.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get halfway there and the bridge is out, I'm going to have to reroute to get to another way across the water.
Well, it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. You know,
Is that what Mike Tyson said?
That's what he
never
said.
told me that.
Yeah, everybody's got a plan. You know, and you're looking at that roadmap, and you guys finally have gotten to it. It's about what, 7 years total in business, and everything's kind of flowing. And then we'll go back to this. You know, there's a change. Something happens. How do you look at your business plan and go, I can adapt these parts of it to this change? And kind of to the market, to the world, to everything like that, because especially working in medical and everything, you've got to kind of go with how the market is. So how did you guys adapt to that?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is you have to plan as if there's no limitations. When you make a plan for perfection, make this perfect pink sky world plan, and then add reality into it and dial it down to match reality. Because if you deal with all the possible negative things that could happen, you'll never make a plan. Because you'll run out of things that you can think of. You'll just know something else is going to go wrong, and you get analysis paralysis. You don't want to execute on your own plan because you keep seeing obstacles.
Is it just kind of a go with it type deal?
There's a little bit of that, but you got to be introspective. You got to look back at the plan and say, was there something wrong with this plan, or did something just happen? Because there's a difference. If you're hitting your head against the wall, if over and over and over you're doing something and it's not working, you better check whether it's your method or the idea behind it that's actually letting you down. So in our case, when things went wrong, we could go back and look at the plan and say, is the plan still valid? Yes, but we have to add in this wrinkle. If we look back at the plan and go, wow, that was a stupid idea, well, time to toss the plan and come up with a new one.
Yeah.
But overwhelmingly, our plan was general enough, but aggressive enough that the plan still looked good. We just had to figure out how to get across this hurdle to keep going with the plan.
And when you have that plan laid out, do you start with, I know you had the 3 years, the 6 years, all these kind of end marks or time in them rather. Do you have the end game in mind, the end goal type of thing? Like, are you looking at like, where do we actually want to be? Because I mean, even this company is evolving and it's turning into other businesses and everything, and it's looking outside of it being just dental. It's technology. It's what we use, how we use what we have to turn it into other things. Is that something you guys had in mind, or is it something that's just kind of evolved?
That part has evolved. There were a couple of basic principles that we talked about at the very beginning, one of which is what happens to a company in the end. In the end, all companies end up in one of three places. They go public, they close their doors, or they transition to other owners, whether it's being passed on to kids or sold to an outside buyer, sold to the employees, whatever. But there's only three ultimate destinations for a company. Shuts down. We said that's never happening. It goes public, which we didn't see happening because the costs involved with doing that mean you have to be so gigantic that a lot of times you don't want to do that. So in the end, something will happen to the company. It'll transition to somebody else. And personally, I don't believe in inheriting companies. I don't believe in turning a company over to my kids.
And they're pretty young, so.
Well, and just philosophically, I don't like the idea if you're going to run something, you should build it yourself or you should buy it. You shouldn't have it given to you because you won't understand it or appreciate it well enough. I'm not going to give my kid a new car. It's just not going to happen. They can earn one, certainly, and I'll help them figure out how to do that. But I'm not in favor of gifting things like that. And with a company, it's way more important because it's people. So you don't turn people over to someone else unless that person is absolutely going to do the right thing. And there's no way to know that when you're talking about family because your kids will surprise you no matter what you expect.
Yeah.
So when we did that, when we said three possible outcomes, there's really only one possible outcome. And that's someday someone will buy this company. Okay, so let's plan based on that. Not any time in the near future, we didn't think. We said, 10, 15 years, whatever, some undetermined amount of time. Someday someone will want to buy the company. How do we want that to go? We want that to be something where it's what we called a pedestal acquisition. We didn't want to be somebody that A buyer's like, oh, I just want something in Orlando. I guess I'll pick up this one so I have some market share or something. We wanted to be something that if someone looked at acquiring us, it was because it was us, not just some numbers on a page. These people, these methods, this style, this culture. So we said, what does that look like? What kind of a culture can we enjoy and be proud of that also represents a significant value to the world? And that's what we worked on building.
And was that in the initial plan, or was that an adaptation?
In the initial plan, from day one. When Chad and I got together and talked about it, we said, one day we're not going to be partners. All partnerships end. All marriages end, sometimes in death, but all partnerships end sooner or later. How do you want it to end? And we talked about that if we're choosing to end the partnership, we want it to end with us clapping each other on the back saying, well done, I'm glad I did this with you, kind of thing.
Well, that's interesting because I've never heard that about, I've never had a partnership business like this, obviously. I've had a couple little, things here and there.
Ever had a girlfriend?
Oh, yeah, that ended.
Did it end?
Oh,
They always do.
Yeah. No,
I mean, one way or another, they always do.
Oh, they always end those engagements, all that fun stuff. But no, I've never heard of that, and I think that that's something interesting that somebody can take from this if they're, an entrepreneur, if they're starting their business and they're going into it with, say, a friend or a fellow coworker or somebody that you guys you're going to eventually have that time where you're like, well, all right. And I've never heard anybody bring that up before.
A good contract lawyer, which you need if you're going into business with someone else, will tell you the most important thing is to define the terms under which the partnership ends.
Okay, that's key right there.
If you are going to go separate ways, how does that work? What are your rights and obligations to each other that you agree in advance? If I don't want to do this anymore, here's what's going to happen. You get a chance to buy me out, or I can take it to someone else and you get to approve. Whatever the details of the agreement are don't really matter so long as you agree to them ahead of time. And you have to accept it's going to end one way or another. It may end because you're both 99 years old and you both go to the grave side by side, as some couples do. But it will end at some point. Define those terms. So we define that for our partnership. We define that for the business. We define that for the employees. If both of us are going to leave, what are we leaving the employees with? That's part of the definition of what we would consider.
And was that in the plan?
Yeah.
The initial layout?
The whole thing.
Wow, that's really interesting. I guess you can plan for, what you can or what's going to come up. When you're putting out that roadmap and everything, what kind of goals do you set for yourself? Is it always just we're going to sell this amount of teeth to dentists and everything across where we are regionally? We're in Florida. Is it looking at that, or is it going we're going to go global? Because I know I listened to I went to a symposium with John Rivers, who owns Four Rivers barbecue shops, and he got to a point where he was growing too fast.
Yep.
And have you kind of seen that as we've had these different markets? We now have one in Jacksonville, one in Leesburg. We're looking at a few other places. Is there a point where you go, okay, now we need to simmer down?
Absolutely.
Based on this point?
Yep. We've talked about that before when we talk about speed. If you're experiencing customer dissatisfaction or employee disengagement or an inability to pay your bills, you're going too fast. Those are the ways to know you have to slow down. If you're not experiencing any of those problems, you're probably going too slow, because if nothing is the least bit disrupted, you're probably coasting.
So are you adjusting that plan constantly as you go along that?
Not the plan. The plan's the plan. Once it's done, it's done. That's our plan, unless something catastrophic changes in the industry, some massive disruption of technology or something, in which case we insert that into the plan. The plan stays the way it is. It's the day-to-day, month-to-month tactical actions we take to stay on the plan that we adapt.
So you've got a plan for business. Do you take that same idea, as you've had a successful business plan that's worked, obviously, do you take that and kind of look at it, go, I could do this for my life too?
I did.
Oh yeah. You showed me your folder. Kids, he has a folder of his life plans. And,
My plans for me.
kind of what do you lay out in there? And this is to anybody, and you can take your business plan and you put it in your life, and you take your life and you put it in your business. So kind of what do you lay out in there?
Well, a bunch of things. So people talk about work-life balance all the time, right? And it's one of those things I'm not thrilled with the way people approach it because they think it's this either-or proposition. If I work too much, I have no social life. If I don't work enough, I don't have enough money to live the life I want to live, that kind of thing. And I'm like, you can't just apply some arbitrary metric to everybody. You can't say everybody should work a 40-hour week. Some people should work a 70-hour week because that's what they get off on. Some people don't want to work at all and are okay with having a modest lifestyle that goes with that. But the reality is, to me, work-life balance is that one doesn't disrupt the other. So I have to have a holistic view. I have to have an approach to my life that supports my career, my home life, my social life, my psychology, my health, all those things. And it's not a question of, did I work too much? It's a question of, am I feeling a sense of accomplishment with the things that I'm doing at the level I'm doing them at? The things that I do with the planning at home, I'm planning about my health. And specifically, not just, I'd like to lose 20 pounds, which I do need to lose 20 pounds, but what do I want my resting heart rate to be? Who does that?
That's specific.
That's specific. Because you know what? Resting heart rate is not just an indication of health. It's an indication of mental well-being, that you can relax, that you do have the ability to unplug and calm down. What do I want my heart rate to be after I run a mile? Those are metrics I'm using to start getting some of my physical things in line where they should be. But I also do it with mental things. How much time a day do I want to spend on mental exercises or just free thinking or recreation? I just want to go play a computer game for an hour or something. That's important.
Or when to learn or kind of train yourself to shut your head up every once in a while. Because I think that's a big problem I have. I doesn't shut up.
I can't.
Yeah.
The only time I've been able to do is when I float.
You have a float tank.
Yeah.
Seen it before. I've seen it a ton of times. But
all the cool people do.
So what part of what part of the thing's the size of a Honda Civic too? It's pretty awesome. But what do you get out of that? How do you kind of dial that into your plan?
The total lack of external stimuli makes my brain sound really loud. I mean, crushingly loud. As soon as you turn everything else off, I realize I'm screaming inside my own head. And then I go, calm down. Take it down a notch, dude.
So you can put that into your plan. So let's kind of dive into that. I mean, this is kind of veering off, but what do you when you're done floating and you're done having your own head scream at you, what are you taking from that? Do you
clarity.
Kind of take out from that session?
Yeah, so what it's like for me, and it varies depending on what's going on in the week and stuff and how often I've done it. Like, I haven't done it very much lately because I'm out of balance. But when I was doing it regularly, like 3 times a week, I would have the first 10 to 15 minutes is nothing but waiting for the audience to shut up. The audience being me in my own head. Just waiting for the noise to die down so I could hear 1 or 2 voices instead of this cacophony of 1,000 ideas and thoughts and problems. So 10 to 15 minutes of just calming down, quieting the voices. And then I would pick 1 or 2 things to consciously think about. Oh, I got to figure out this problem. I've got to think about this conversation I need to have with someone later that I'm concerned with getting right. And I would do that. And then it would just kind of stop, and my mind would just float. I would literally just let my mind wander, only it wasn't like daydreaming where you're just sitting there bouncing from thing to thing. It's very focused because there are no external stimuli, and you've quieted the voices inside your head. Much like transcendental meditation, you've taken control over your own process. And at that point, I get all these great ideas. Like, it's the point where I normally set a timer for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, depending on how much time I have. And I almost never hear the timer go off because I'm out of the tank before the time is up because I've got too many ideas. I got to start writing them down.
So You go in there to shut it off, and then you just come out with more.
Yeah. Only I come out with pure. When I come out of the tank, it was amazing the first time I did it. I got out of it. I walked. I'd done it at a commercial place, and I walked outside and looked around, and the air smelled purer, the lights, the colors were crisper, sounds were sharper. It was like all my senses had been turned up.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. It was just like coming out of meditation when you do really deep meditation. I walked back in to go to the front desk and told them I wanted to book 2 more sessions for Chad and Borden, for my partners, because I was like, they got to try this. They got to see what this is like.
So, I mean, you pull stuff out of that, and where do you kind of get your inspiration for these plans? Like laying out stuff, like you say, you do the float, and you get an inspiration from it. Mm-hmm. What do you kind of do to clear your head and get an idea of what you need to do as far as like continuing a business?
Well, you go back to the plan first of all. If you're running out of plan, then you've got to start over and start thinking further down the line. But generally, there is so much to do to improve what you're already doing that you don't have to think of new stuff. You got to think of better ways, simpler ways usually, to do the stuff you're already doing.
What do you think is something somebody does wrong on a plan? Like when they're laying out and they're like, I'm going to make $1 million in the first year. Do you think there's something, like, what are the things you've seen that have gone wrong?
No basis in reality. You see it all the time. You watch Shark Tank.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody thinks they're going to be a multimillionaire because they made a fidget spinner. Well, someone did. But there's lots of other things that go on that show, for an example. Dumb ideas. Or ideas of like hitting somebody in the face with a pork chop or something. No, that was last time. There's
Pork Bay is still going to happen. I swear it's going to happen.
But there's lots of things that are just an idea for a product that aren't a business. And they all do the same thing. They go, yeah, but if I get just 1% of the market, well, what's your market? These people use the entire human population as a potential market. Out of 6 billion people on the planet, if only 1% decides to buy my widget, well, yeah, how the heck are you going to get at 1% of the entire planet as your market? That's crazy.
Is a big part of the plan the longevity of the company. So you take, for instance, let's go back to the gimmick stuff. Mm-hmm. Pet rock. Okay, dude made millions of dollars selling a rock to people
for 1 year.
For 1 year as a pet. That had no longevity on it. Granted, in the dental business, there is a longevity because people, teeth fall out, people have problems. So was that something you looked at as like, we can go a long time with this?
Sure, but there's always changes. Technology changes things. You're seeing more people have things made right in the dental office now instead of it going to a laboratory. That's a very common thing that's changing. Well, in our thinking, in our planning, we planned for that. If that happens, we know we will decrease our outlay for capital expenses for big mills and equipment and increase our outlay for software and support, for training, so that our people can be a resource to those offices who want to make things themselves but run into problems, so that we could become a consultant rather than a manufacturer. So there's always going to be a need for something, and you have to define your business in such a way that you're sure you can adapt to the changing times.
And that's a big part of it. But do you, in that plan, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but I want to dive more in. Do you plan for losses in there, in that plan, how big was that business plan that you laid out?
I keep quoting numbers and I keep getting them wrong. I think it was 34 pages.
So 34 pages. Do you have a couple pages in there where you're like, this is where we are going to fail?
If all hell breaks loose, here's where we pull the ripcord?
Yeah.
No.
You just don't even.
I refuse to accept the possibility of failure.
You don't even.
We'll
you
adapt.
Don't have
we'll
the
change.
idea.
It's not even there. There is no point in my mind where I'm ready to judge a failure. It just needs to be tweaked.
And what's a failure to you in your current business or future businesses?
Having to close it, having to lay people off, having to, reset the business in a way that hurts customers or employees.
How should somebody that's starting a business, an entrepreneur, a new business owner, how should they kind of prepare themselves for those situations? Because the last year and a half, 2 years has shown us stuff happens, okay? And how do you prepare to make sure that you're mentally stable to endure those problems?
I don't. That's a thing we've talked about. When people come to me and ask, should I open my own business? I say, I don't know. Are you prepared to do whatever it takes? If it doesn't matter if you don't sleep for 3 days straight while you work, you ready to do that? Because if you're not ready to commit on that level, you might want to rethink it or reset your scale on how far you think you're going to get with it.
I think a big hiccup that's happened in the last couple years, I would even say, is people think they can start their own businesses. People are TikTok famous, they're YouTube famous, they're everything like that, and all of a sudden they think they're like this entrepreneur, business owner, blah 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 blah. But there's a difference between that and actually running a business like this, right?
Well, of course, yeah. Anybody can be a Kardashian.
Yeah. Well, I got the camera equipment if you want to make the video.
No, it's been proved because the Kardashians are Kardashians.
True, very true.
With no relative value of any kind, somehow they have a celebrity status that gives them an artificial value without actually producing or providing anything of meaning. So if you have people like that, then clearly it's possible. But that's nothing compared to actually running an enterprise.
Do you think that's something that's been toxic in the market?
Clearly.
That's come around,
Clearly.
like from everybody you've talked to, and whether it's the dental industry or whether it's just the business industry, as an owner, like, kind of tell us about like what have you seen out there as kind of these new business owners have popped up?
If you believe in the devil, he created Facebook. Not personifying whoever that guy is that created it.
So you're saying Zuckerberg's the devil?
But I believe that the devil is behind social media. In an attempt to destroy all humanity's trust and faith in one another, social media was created so people would learn how to hate each other in new and different ways for no reason at all.
And is that something that, I mean, obviously you can't plan for that, and we've kind of upped our social media stuff here, and we're getting more involved in showing off stuff. But do you think that that's important?
I think you have to understand the buyer. I think you have to understand the customer. If the customer likes something, even if you think it's stupid, they like it. They're the ones paying for it. You have to respect that. You have to recognize that, I can get on my high horse and say, we're never going to be on social media because I think social media is too destructive. Well, that would be biting off my nose to spite my face because there's a whole bunch of business to be gained through social media. So I'm not going to do that. But I also don't really participate in it personally.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a LinkedIn. I think that's about
it.
So, I mean that's
and I only put positive things on there.
Right. I mean,
you've never seen a negative post on anything from me on any social media.
Yeah,
because I won't do it. I won't feed that monster.
And do you think that goes into the plan of having to now adapt to that environment? Of having those negative troll type people out there?
It does, but in our case, it is taking the high ground. It's just don't respond. If someone puts something out there that's categorically untrue, clarify the truth. But other than that, don't engage. We've got all those websites out there that evaluate employers, Glassdoor and even Google.
Yeah.
And, we get negative reviews sometimes. And I get very concerned when I see something like that, especially if I can't identify who put it up there. I look and I go, is that even real? Is that someone that worked here? That doesn't sound like something that happens here. So, and then we go ask. We go around and talk to anybody who works in an area where someone left anytime recently, and, is it possible that someone left and said these things about us? And if so, is there any merit to it? And the way we combat that is just encourage our people to go on and share their experiences. Not going to get on and argue with someone on social media. Like, no, you sucked. That's why you don't work here anymore. I'm not going to do that. I see enough nonsense. They make up stories about me and put them up there. And I go, that's dumb. And people say, oh, don't you want to go fight it? No, I don't want to fight it. What?
What's that? I mean, what can you gain from that?
The problem with arguing with idiots is that they drag you down to their level and beat you with experience.
What do you mean by that? Beat you with experience?
They're better at being idiots than I am.
Right. Okay. So I get that, and I think that an example I'll pull out is when SeaWorld had the Blackfish documentary come out, they went right at all the PETA people.
Right.
And all they did was put up billboards attacking, and it's like, why even
This turns
acknowledge
into
it?
a giant war.
Yeah.
And that's not your job.
No.
You're not a soldier. You're supposed to be entertaining with wildlife and stuff.
And with, with this company, it's a very niche market. Not a lot of people make the stuff we do. We actually just posted last week. All our technology is evolving, and we even make teeth for to look like the alien queen's teeth. I mean, but that's how you kind of have to keep evolving. And where do you kind of see the company going from here? Like, we've very successful. Everything's grown. We have, all the big end technology going on. Where do you kind of see the company going?
Well,
your next set of the plan.
We've already seen it starting. One portion of the plan for this phase, for the next few years, is to integrate verticals. So we started to move things in-house. We brought media in-house. We brought accounting in-house. We brought projects in-house. We've brought systems in-house. Now we're doing vehicle repairs in-house. We maintain our own fleet, and we do more and more of that. We keep taking the verticals, the things we pay other people to do, and when we are dissatisfied or think we can do it better, we move it in-house and we start doing that thing.
And is that kind of comes from the genesis of the entire plan of we can do it better?
If we can do it better, why aren't we?
Yeah. And where do you kind of see, where's kind of the next level of the technology we have? Because that's a big push we have is you'll see it on our social media and you'll see it, in the coming months, big technology push. But where do you want to kind of grow?
Printing and communication systems. Because 3D printing is, of course, everybody knows it's taking off. I mean, we've got, I don't know, $500,000 worth of milling equipment and twice that much printing equipment. And we've got 14 3D printers of various sizes and shapes right now. I expect that that's just going to keep growing. And as it grows, you have other applications. You can do other things if you have a 3D printer that are very hard to do if you don't have the expertise. Anyone can go on Thingiverse, download a keychain, make it on their home 3D printer. That's cool. I mean, that's a great thing. But when you start getting into medical devices, when you start getting into high tolerances, when you start getting into multi-materials, you start talking about printing metals and high-density plastics and all kinds of things like that, the sky's the limit. There's a limitless opportunity out there, but there's not a lot of people who are really good at it. And in particular, we're really good at adapting and making something quickly. So that puts us in a position to look at different markets and say, so you have a need for something on demand. How long do you expect to wait for it right now? Oh, 2 weeks. Well, if you could have it in 2 days, would that have value to you? Would that make your life better? Would that improve your business needing this thing? And if the answer is yes, let's talk. Because that's where I see a lot of it going, is applying this expertise across more platforms.
And the systems you put in place and how everything works and that's a key to it, right? And was that part of the initial plan?
Absolutely.
Was how you manage everything? I know your role has evolved a lot.
Sure.
And things have changed, but is that part of how you've kind of positioned everything from the beginning?
Absolutely. It was all about understanding the workflows, using lean manufacturing principles, which is very hard to do in a build-to-order environment. Lean is it's an exceptional tool in a build-to-inventory environment. In a build-to-order environment, there's a whole different set of challenges. You can apply certain principles of lean, and other things you have to set aside because it doesn't operate that way. But we have continually evolved the simplification and ease of communicating the workflow so that problems are easier to spot, things can move faster without compromising something.
And how have you done that ease of communicating? Is that through technology? Is that through just bluntly talking to people? Or is it just getting information out? How have you done that?
It's everything, but usually it's standardizing and simplifying the way people communicate, making sure that everybody who requests a day off requests it using the same medium, whether they're allowed to text their supervisor or submit a ticket or whatever. All of those kinds of things, they start out in a small business being very haphazard. If you worked here 4 years ago and you were taking a day off, and I asked you, hey, how'd you ask for the day off? I could get 10 different answers. One person said I texted my boss. One person said I called. One person said I left an email. One person said I just walked past and mentioned it. There was no consistency. Today, they all do it the same way. So continuing to refine that so that someone automatically knows if I am communicating this kind of information, I do it in this manner. That makes things a lot simpler. Also, identifying groups of people. One of the most common problems we or anybody else has in any larger organization or any group setting is somebody didn't get told. Okay, we do it all the time. We say, okay, we've got this new project. It's going to involve these 8 people. Let's make sure they all know about it. 2 weeks later, person number 9 walks up to me and goes, hey, I heard about this project. Shouldn't I know about this? I go, oh, crap, yeah. Part of your job does overlap with that. And when you've got a lot of moving parts, that can be hard to keep track of. So evolving those kinds of things, evolving lists, if you can imagine it, to be more useful. Labels, categories are incredibly important at that point.
And is that something that you've seen, as you've been your own business owner? I mean, you worked for big companies before and big projects and everything like that. But when you see it, finally on the, bottom line and you're responsible for it, is that something that, an entrepreneur or somebody starting a business out there should keep an eye out for from the beginning?
The communication problem?
Communication problems.
Absolutely. Keep your communications as simple as possible. Don't complicate them, but find ways to involve everyone in things as much as possible.
And so, as we kind of wrap everything up here, when you hit a goal and you're looking for the next goal, how do you kind of, push yourself to reach that next place? Where do you have to go? So you say, you hit that 3-year mark. Okay, great. We hit that 6-year mark. Great. Now we're on to the next 3 years. What's the goal now? What you've got a fantastic house, you got all the fancy cars in the world, Hunter watches, all this stuff, nice shirts. Look at this. Look at the cuff thing. I mean, look at that. He's got even a cuff connector. What is kind of your end goal, and how do you keep pushing yourself to that?
Oh, like anybody else, more. No, it shifts. It's no different for a business owner than it is for a person who works for another person. Money's really, really important up to a point. After that, the money becomes far less important and other things take precedence.
And is it bigger of a goal than the money?
Oh,
so
yeah.
everybody
Dramatically.
wants financial stability. So everybody's got a number in their head where they're like, oh, I'm comfortable with this. Then when you hit that and you're like, okay, I've got enough money to, retire at this point, but I want to accomplish something. So is that important for you to set?
Absolutely. The money is very much just a means to an end. And at this point, it's like, well, I'm sure I'll make more money as the company's more successful, but it's a natural byproduct. It's the same thing with profit. We don't set a profit goal. Profit is the natural byproduct of doing the right things the right way. So it's the same thing with personal income. If I do enough things right, I'll make more money, and I'll enjoy that. But the goal isn't to keep elevating my bank account or something. The goal is to accomplish something. It's to build something that lasts. It's to influence a lot of people and to make a difference with a lot of people. It's to have the resources to impact on a larger level. All of those kinds of things come as more money comes along. And when you start to discover it, it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's something important for everybody out there that wants to start their own business, start their own, social media campaign, their OnlyFans, their Twitch account, whatever they got to do. But you got to have some type of goal. And in wrapping up, for any entrepreneur or any new business owner, what would be the one thing they should focus on when they're starting their business? Because we all go, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to do my own thing, What is the one thing that you started out with, like the genesis of it, that you would tell them to focus on?
Well, you got the cliche, failing to plan is planning to fail. It's true. Spend more time planning, not dreaming. Planning. Dreaming's great. It feels good. But planning is how you turn it into a reality. And most people don't plan enough. They go, I know what I'm going to do. I got an idea. I'm gonna open a food truck. So I'm gonna get a truck and I'm gonna get some food and I'm gonna sell it.
And you're planning on that.
Yeah, that'll be next month. Our food truck gets here, but that's their plan.
Yeah.
Their plan is to get the food truck, get the supplies, cook the food, sell the food, and go to the bank. But that's not a plan. That's a diagram. That's not a plan. How much are you going to spend? What kind of food are you going to offer? How are you going to prepare it? Where are you going to prepare it? How many employees do you need? Are you going to do this full-time or part-time? If you're doing it full-time, where are you going to do it? Part-time is easy. Weekend food truck things are everywhere. What are you going to do on Tuesday mornings? What does the food truck do then? What is it for? Are you planning on getting 5 eventually? Or are you just going to get one and see how it goes? There's so much more to planning that. I'm dabbling. I bought a food truck. Well, my plan has 5 food trucks in it. I already know what 5 foods go in the 5 food trucks. I already know where the dry goods are going to be stored. I already know at what point I'll buy a walk-in cooler to support the food trucks. I already know it. I've already mapped out all that stuff.
The kitchen.
I might never get there because it may be I get the first one and I don't have any fun. If I'm not having fun, I won't keep doing it. But if I'm having fun, I've got the whole plan laid out for 3 years from now, 5 food trucks and where they park and what they serve, everything.
I'm going to keep pitching Pork Bay as
I
one
know
of
you
your
will.
food trucks. It's going to be one of the things.
Maybe we could just buy a single, like a rubber pork chop, and you can just
No. It's got to be cooked. It's going to be fantastic. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Completing the Puzzle with Mr. Jason DeFranco. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell so you get the notifications. We're going to have a lot more content coming to you shortly.
Hey, and ask some questions. I wouldn't mind hearing some questions.
Yes, ask questions down in the comments.
We can do a question and answer episode one of these days.
Question answer. We're building out our studio. We'll do a tour of it soon, and so you can see we're going to have a whole thing going on, and we may be able to zoom you in, and you can ask it live even when we do one of these. So
now you're getting crazy.
Now it's going to be hey. You told me just go crazy, so that's what we're going to do. All righty, thanks for watching. Peace and love.